Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of the Law and Ethics podcast with Paul. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk about the case of the dishonest employee. It's an interesting one, to be honest. A lot of us have looked at our CV when applying for a job and thought, maybe we'll make a few changes here, make a few changes there, just to make ourselves look good, make it look more competitive. This is in this case. We'll find out what happens if you do make a mistake or if you make an entry on a CV that doesn't actually add up when it gets checked. So, in our episode today, we'll have a look at a case. Obviously, we can't go into too much details because of the sensitivities of the case and certain issues around it. But there's a few things that we can tell you from the go. So, we have a technician who started a new job the same day that he was supposed to finish a previous place. He was signed off sick, but didn't mention it to the new employer. He didn't mention the current employer on his CV. He was subject to investigation by previous employer, which he didn't mention either. So, Paul, welcome to the show again.
Thank you for thanking you.
Well, this is a show. You are the co-host, so welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah, just so you know, we might as well have you back on. You are Paul. So.
Oh, you're too kind. Too kind.
So, tell us a bit more about this case. On the face of it, it looks like someone who's just basically decided, well, I'm going to finish there today. I might as well start my job at the new place and make some extra cash as well on the same day and make my CV look good.
Right.
Tell us what actually happened on the with this client that you represented.
Okay, so basically, this was a bit of a slow burner. It took from 2015 to 2019, and before it was effectively disposed of in front of a fitness to practice committee. You've summed up the allegations there really well, and the main primary allegation was in relation to the start and end dates of employment, with the end date of the old employer overlapping on the same day as the start date with the new employer. There was also, as you mentioned, an allegation in relation to also stating previous facts which were mentioned on an application form. Throughout these allegations, the council really pushed for dishonesty on all of them, saying that registrant conduct was dishonest. What happens is exactly what you've outlined. The beginning date of the new employment overlapped with the end date of the old employment. It was the same day. So what happened here is the registrant made a decision to telephone his old employer, say I'm not coming in, and went to his new employer. This then started coming about because of a referral by an agency in relation to inconsistencies in relation to CVs, or ACV, precisely, and also information that was put on an application form, which then, when questioned, was found not to be wholly truthful in the agency's eyes. This then prompted them to refer the registrant. It was only when that referral was made that they found out about end date and start date scenario. So of course they turned around and said your conduct was dishonest because you failed to tell your old employer about your new employment start date. You failed to submit a correct fee. Failed to declare certain information on an application for agency. Now, this all started in 2000, and it would have been ongoing for around about between 4 to 6 months before it landed on my doorstep, late 2000. We've then got numerous hold-ups, both from registrant in getting medical evidence, etc. together, but also delays from the council's end as well, such as change of caseworker, so on and so forth. And of course, they need to gather evidence, they need to get witness availability. So everything needs to come together for set dates. When the hearing first came into the hearing chamber, evidence started to be given which contradicted witness statements. So the hearing was stopped at that point and it was then rescheduled. When it was rescheduled, unfortunately, the registrant became ill for 2 days. So the hearing was halted at that point and rescheduled. The most suitable date was 6 months from the date when the second hearing be adjourned. So, there was lots of things going on which led to nearly 4.5 initial referral and disposal at the fitness to practice. One thing that came out in the fitness to practice hearing was that 6 of the 8 allegations fell away. The council hadn't proved. Now, in relation to when a fitness to practice case comes in front of a fitness to practice panel, it is for the person or the corporate body, in this case the GPHC, to bring the case and to prove the case, not for the registrant to prove their innocence. A lot of registrants go in, guns are blazing, I'm innocent, I'm this, I'm that. Not about that. The council need to prove the case. They've brought the case they need to prove. And on 6 of 8 of the allegations, they couldn't. Of course, when the main allegations regarding CV and the other 2 allegations, information which was not included on an application form, when they weren't found, proved the dishonesty allegations in relation to them. But the main allegation of the start dates was found. And it was found that the dishonestly. However, the committee at this point put forward their reasoning behind that. And they had said that, in their opinion, the registrant had panicked. They put themselves in an impossible position. They didn't know how to handle it correctly, and they panicked. One thing they also stated as well was that the dishonesty element was on the lower end of the scale. Now, for all those who can remember the first podcast, I did say that any dishonesty is a serious offence, but not all dishonesty will lead to a higher sentence. And this was one of those cases where the dishonesty part of the allegation was stated to be at the lower end of the scale.
So just want to, while you're on the case of the dishonesty part, there's a couple of things that I noticed. There's one thing was a dishonesty test, and there's another thing called the IV test. Tell us a bit more about what these tests are.
Right, okay. So basically what you've just described there is the same thing. Prior to 2017, and it was late 2017, the judgment was November 2007. The dishonesty test was, is the conduct complained of, could it be viewed as dishonest? Yeah, and if the answer is yes, it moves on to the next stage, which is, did the person committing those acts or that act believe that they were acting dishonest? Now, this comes from a case called Twin Sectra in the civil arena, but in the criminal jurisdiction, it comes from the Crown and Gauche. I believe that was mid to late 80s, maybe as early as very early 90s. So you had that objective element, but you've also got the subjective element coming in as well. Now, the courts over the years had been very dissatisfied, especially in the civil arena, regarding this. And in 2017, a case called Ivy and Genting Casinos came to the Supreme Court, the High Court in the UK, and it was decided to basically brush away the old dishonesty test, the objective and subjective elements, and replace it purely with an objective. So the test in Ivy is the conduct complained of, can it be viewed as being dishonest? And would an ordinary, well-informed member of the public view that conduct as dishonest? So away went the subjective element, and in came a completely, purely objective. That is the case that was used. In this case which we're talking about, that was the case used for dishonest, proving dishonest. Hope that makes that clear, or a little bit clear.
It does make it clearer. So I think, so at least in this case, so it was basically proved that he wasn't actually, technically wasn't trying to be dishonest on purpose. He was just basically panicked.
Yeah.
So I think the lesson from this case is that if you're in that kind of situation where you're double booked, I think in relation to if we try and relate it to the locum scenario, where a lot of locums double book by mistake, instead of you calling in sick, just explain that you've been double booked and try and find a solution to it. Find someone else to cover your shift rather than calling in sick and then being found out that you're not. You're actually at work somewhere else. And this has happened in the past where people did call in sick and it was found out they're actually working at another branch or another pharmacy.
And of course, I think it's that is quite serious, because it does show that the registrant who has called in, say for example, sick and has gone to work elsewhere, is being dishonest, because it will be shown that most likely not that registrant did that financial gain.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
We are. I mean,
even if they didn't, I mean, sometimes honestly people do panic, and you have moments where you double book. And I've double booked myself. And in the past, when it did happen, it was like I was working with different agencies, and each agency booked me in, and I wasn't aware that they booked me in. But there's another agency who like to book you in advance and never tell you until the day. So it depends who you work with. So I think sometimes it's, if you do end up double booking, you know what, just own up and say, you know what, guys, I made a mistake. Hands up.
Of course, and that's the best. It may leave a bit of a bad taste in people's mouth, but that is the best way of doing it.
Yeah. But the worst thing that could happen is you get a slap on the wrist, or a coordinator gets peed off. They have to pay a bit more, but that's the worst. But if you ever get caught, the worst thing for you is you stand in front of the FTP committee and explain yourself why you're double booked, why you called in sick, and then you went to somewhere else to work. That's obviously dishonesty right there. And I think that's one of the key lessons from this case and hopefully from this podcast. Polly, would you like to add anything else before we end?
Yeah, there's just a couple of things. We have mentioned the outcome of the case. Now, the outcome of the case was that this registrant's fitness to practice was found not to be impaired. Now, in relation to what the Fitness to Practice Committee can then do, if your fitness to practice is not impaired, they can still issue a warning. It is entirely appropriate for the Fitness to Practice Committee to do so. Or they can give advice, or they can do nothing. And in this case, they gave advice, which was basically, don't do it again. Now, they knew that this registrant was going to do it again. This registrant had actually been a healthcare professional for longer than had actually been alive at the point of the hearing. Very rare for that to happen, but it does happen. They'd been in various healthcare professionals in the pharmacy world for 45 years. They were older. They'd done that longer than I'd been alive. Quite scary, to be honest. Quite scary, but that's what had happened. And the committee elected to basically give some advice. So that was the disposal of the case. 4.5 years, multiples of thousands of pounds for representation costs. They walk away with what could be classed as a finger wag, a bit of a telling off. That was that. But quite interestingly, you mentioned earlier on, right at the beginning, about CVs. Yeah. Now, in this case, it was the committee accepted that there would be numerous versions of the CV, and the wrong one had been sent. However, there has been a case in the last few years where somebody has stated on a CV they'd completed a postgraduate course and they hadn't. That was met with a suspension of 1 month by the fitness department. That's how serious they took it. There have also been numerous other cases of plagiarism, etc. And I'm sure we'll cover that more in depth on a later episode. But again, they are met with very severe sanctions of suspension, normally mid-range, so 6 to 9 months. You're really talking, quite serious consequences for what you think, I'll be able to get away with it. And if you found out, it will go in front of the GPHC. It is dishonesty, but this planned, unlike in this case where it was a knee-jerk, it was a situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think when you're just talking about the CVs, trying to make it look good. I think we get a lot of messages on social media, on Telegram about writing CVs and trying to make it good. I think a lot of people do panic and so on. I really need to get this job. They try and add all sorts of things to their CV to make it look good. Personally, what I advise is, put down what you've actually done.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can really, in the moment of trying to make ourselves look really good, we say things that are damn near impossible. And we do have through the cooperative, we do work with a company that helps you write your CV. So you can always get in touch with us to help you make sure your CV is the best it can be. But in terms of writing up a CV for yourself, just be honest. And to be honest, if the company doesn't want to take you on for being who you are as an employee, as a pharmacist, and they don't appreciate the experience that you bring in, try somewhere else. That's
course.
Better than trying to write up a CV where you said you've done so many things which you literally have never done. Yeah. And these things do come out, like when I've interviewed certain people about certain things, and they said, I can do X, Y, and Z. I've done so many amazing things. When I start pressing them on it and start going into more and more detail, their stories doesn't match up, and they can't explain themselves on the things that they've done. In a real life interview, when you go and say something like these things, then when people, they will start asking you about these things that you've put on your CV, and they'll go through point by point by point, and if it turns out you've not been honest, it will make you look really bad on the interview itself, and if you get reported.
You've got to ask yourself the question: would you employ somebody who was so dishonest they have lied on their CV? The answer is no.
Personally, I would never, because if they can lie on their CV, what else could they be lying about?
Exactly, and it shows if they've done it before, they will most likely do it again. It's the old adage of best predictor of future behaviour is past. If you've done it before, you'll do it again, and the company will not take that chance. And remember, because we are professionals, you have to abide by the standards at all times, and that includes standard 6, which is being professional. And part of displaying that standard or adhering to that standard is being open and honest at all times. Not just when you're in the workplace, but it's a 24/7 365 day a year thing which you
Absolutely.
need to abide by.
So we're going to end it on there today. It's been great having you on the show again, Paul.
Andy, pleasure to come
and it
back on.
was yeah, no, I mean we're doing a whole series, so you'll be seeing more of you today on this series.
Unfortunately, yes.
Sorry.
Unfortunately, yes.
Fortunately, to be honest, I think having you on the network itself has helped a lot of people, and you've been really, really helpful with.
I'm grateful I can be of some assistance.
Yeah, and I appreciate you also coming on and supporting us with the podcast as well. Actually, your legal knowledge is really good, and you've give a different type of insight that most pharmacists wouldn't otherwise have. So going to end it there today. On our next episode, we'll be talking about Class A and Class C drugs, and about a pharmacist who was at a festival and was arrested and cautioned for taking Class A drugs. So we'll see you on the next one. Bye.